Welcome to The Non-Writer, where I tell stories from the avant-garde, lately exploring the avant music in my record collection, and maybe yours too. I was extremely fortunate to get to talk to two-thirds of the Fred Frith Trio recently. I saw them perform the first night of their short West Coast tour, and the morning of the next day, we got together on Zoom right before they were getting ready to head to their next city of the tour. So enjoy our conversation with Jason Hoops and Jordan Glenn of the Fred Frith Trio. So the show last night was pretty awesome. I was telling Jordan that I've seen you guys a few times before, but last night's show was kind of off the charts compared to the other shows I've seen. I always liked you guys, but man, there was something different about last night. And I bounced this off of a few other people at the show, and they all seemed to feel the same way. I want to get into the kind of the evolution of the band. I mean, you guys have been together for a while now. But before we do that, I still want to focus on the show last night a little bit. And I did an email interview with Fred about his return to touring, and this is clearly COVID may not be over with, but live music is back to a large degree. And you guys were just in Europe in March, but there's been this long period of time where live music wasn't happening. Do you think last night's or your performances now are somehow affected by that long layoff?
In some ways, but in like maybe in terms of like fatigue and things like just the kind of nuts and bolts of like doing the physical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And also I practice regularly, but playing with others in like live is very much its own specific practice.
Sure.
I found. And so not having that is showing a little bit for me, and playing with others as much as I was, all those times of kind of just like being in that situation, and then not having it is it's making it very apparent that that's a major factor for me.
How about you, Jason?
Yeah, I for various reasons took a major break from playing during like 2020 for about 8 months or so. I didn't even pick up my instrument or barely listened to any music. Was just not interested, and spent a lot more time painting and just living my life in other respects. So for me, it's like Jordan said, the practice or the exercise of playing with other people, but for me it also extends into actually sort of refamiliarizing myself in a way, not necessarily with the instrument, but with my interest in playing the instrument. I really like reconfigured my sense of I don't know, maybe inspiration or just the reason that I would want to even approach the instrument. I didn't feel like a bass player or a musician there for a long time.
Sure.
I just kind of, rather than be distressed about it, I just kind of embraced that and went somewhere else.
Right.
So, but it's felt really good to get back in, and it's a bit like riding a bike, I suppose, but with a bit of a fresh. The break was good, I guess, is how I could sum that up.
Sure.
I enjoyed taking a break.
That's what I was going to say. It seemed like it was like a refresh almost, a new start in a way. Because like I say, the band seemed different to me last night than what I'd seen in the past, and maybe it was kind of like having a fresh start after having a long layoff. And there was so much uncertainty in those early days, especially in 2020, about what was the future just going to be like. And it's took a lot longer for live music to come back than I thought it would. And here we are in 2022, and now you guys are back together. Did the trio do anything together during the like 2020, 2021? I mean, even like on a Zoom thing, or did you guys do anything together?
The only thing that I think we kind of did was there was a record that was released that was kind of a, like, not, I don't want to say collage, but it was like mixing a couple different concerts, live concerts that we mulled over a little bit, like listened to some past tour recordings and then decided on what would be released, and then how, and Fred then kind of maybe along with Myles edited it and put it together. So, but that was, that wasn't really, that was what, maybe 2 or 3 emails back and forth. That was,
yeah. Yeah, it was just some listening and touching. It was nice to listen back to those recordings, because those recordings are like right before COVID, lockdown and all that. It was like October, November of 2019, so yeah, it was good to listen back to those, but that was the only real activity that we engaged with in each other, other than just keeping in touch and checking in and stuff. And then when the idea about this last tour in Europe came up, that seemed like a more drawn out process, that coming together, than previous trips.
Well, because they didn't know when that would happen necessarily. If I'm not mistaken, there was like a time set the year before that was all like contingent, and then it just was like, now let's push it back even further.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, it was something like that. Like,
yeah, and it felt like it took a bit longer for some shows to be confirmed, longer in relation to what it's been like previously. So there was a real, going up to this last trip to Europe, for me there was a real sense of like, this could just disappear tomorrow.
Yeah, totally.
Like 5 days out, this could just go away.
Right.
So it was an exercise in like, well, we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
And it ended up happening. So,
okay, I want to get into the March tour in a little more detail in a minute, but getting back to the, how the layoff kind of affected you. The trio is largely an improvising band, and confidence plays a huge role in your ability to improvise together. And last night you guys looked super confident. I mean, so how did first of all, would you agree with that, and how would you say the layoff affected your improvising, or your approach to improvising, and then coming back together as an improvising trio and playing live in front of an audience? How did that affect your confidence?
I'm glad it looked confident. I don't always feel, I mean, you go back and I don't ever feel like confident throughout an entire set. It's like goes in waves. There are moments where I feel like, like I'm flailing up here. I need to back out or do something else. And then I feel really confident. But then those moments after the show, like Jordan might be like, oh, that I was like failing there. And I thought, oh no, like you did really well there or something, so there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into the confidence thing, but that's speaking individually. So, but as a unit, it's just a matter of playing a bunch over time and traveling together and like just growing closer as friends and not just bandmates that get together every now and then and do some gigs, but traveling together and things have brought us closer. And so I think that those, I don't know, for lack of a better term, I guess those bonding experiences give you a trust, a sense of trust that is more quickly accessible in a live setting. So if something is bothering you, or you don't feel necessarily confident in yourself or grounded or anything, at least for me, immediately there's a floor that I can hit where I'm like, well, if it falls apart, at least it falls apart with these guys. And I feel fine about that.
No, that's interesting. You're not interesting, but
It's not interesting.
no, likely no. I think you put your finger on something though that I was thinking about. That or just the more time we spend together, as people, in addition to the music, it helps build confidence, especially with someone like Fred. I mean, like Jason and I have known each other since we moved to the Bay, and we're similar in age. And
How long ago was that?
2006.
Okay.
And but Fred is Fred, and so there's like, for me, it took a while to kind of feel like that I was like on a good footing with him. Not that I ever felt like it was like things were shaky, but the way he plays and how he performs it, talking about confidence, it just there's such gravity to it, and like sureness, even when he's like not that, which you find out later, and that also helps build confidence when you're like, oh, he's selling this in a way,
Sure.
whether or not internally he's unsure. And then then you have your vulnerable moments with each other, and it all just helps build kind of that like feeling of like, oh, okay, I can do this, we can do this, we're it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But my whole my confidence as a player tends to err on the poor side. Like I'm not very confident, almost to the point where it's circled back and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm great, But I think that becomes kind of like playing improvised music. As much as I have it, it starts to feel like, well, anything's acceptable. So like, just let it happen, whatever, and leave it behind you in a sense.
Right.
But last night, going back to that, when you're talking about, we were playing a lot of like composed music, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that was one of my next questions. Was
In
it?
terms of confidence.
I noticed more compositional elements in the pieces last night. So that is true. That
Yeah,
compared to previous. How did that happen?
he'd been talking about writing music for this trio for a long time, maybe a couple years before. No, well, at least a year before COVID. It was like being discussed, and then just kind of when was always he was just always busy or had other things that were more pressing, and this group could always just go up and let loose, like, so that's kind of what it always was, even though I think he wanted to write some stuff and like formally, and then he had some time, but he had some time this past year, but even then it came in very late in the processing stage.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost, and it had this feeling of like, this won't happen, because we even laid out rehearsals that then kind of didn't happen in the number of rehearsals as we'd planned, because of all sorts of things. And so it didn't feel super prepared as we got into tour, and then a tour was supposed to be we'll work it out there.
I see. But that's like a huge difference or change in the band to be adding compositional elements like that. Um, um,
Hmm.
and again, it seemed to add confidence to your performance, and maybe uh, other words that come to mind are like power and energy and the whole thing. The way you guys moved in and out of the compositional elements and into the improvisation was really effective. Did you did you anticipate that?
No, I think it's been the compositional part to me, learning these pieces has been like, I mean, kind of the internal running joke has been, well, we'll learn these pieces or not, and then we'll play them or we won't, and they'll be tight or they'll be loose, or we can start them. We can play them as standalone pieces, or we can put them in the middle of an improvisation, or we can do something else. So it's always been this kind of, well, let's just see where this goes and let's just explore this. Um, Having said that, so there's like syncopated, like dissonant, sort of polyrhythmic aspects to the pieces that make them difficult. They're not easy. They're like relatively short, but they're not easy to get to crack into. And so for me, it was I struggled a bit, just cracking the initial code. And then I think that once, like Jordan said, once we got out on tour, it was more of like, well, how do these blocks even fit into what we're doing? I don't think we really explored that much before tour. It was more about like trying to learn the pieces. And then once we were out playing shows, it was like, do we do these? Do we do them now? Do we start the show with it? Do we end the show with it? Where do these fall in? And then we just tried out a couple of options, sprinkled them in, started with one, started with another, whatever. And then last night, for how we prepared them for this show, I feel was the most it sort of integrated understanding collectively of how they might work. Meaning like, oh, Fred starts this one, or not even that Fred starts this one. There's one particular where we all start, but the idea came up to say, well, in somewhere in the middle of an improvisation, Fred could just start looping his part of the beginning of this one, and we'll hear that. And that means, we can sort of end what we're doing and then cue ourselves in at the top of the piece. And then once Fred hears Jordan and I start the top of the piece, then we all know where we are.
It sounds like you're arranging the pieces in front of a live audience.
Oh,
A
absolutely.
little bit, yeah. There's another one where, like I take on that role of introducing a bass line, just like a 2 or 3 bar bass line, a bass loop underneath whatever is happening, and then Jordan and Fred have the option to move into their parts for that, or not, or they could totally ignore me and keep doing something else and let what I'm doing fade away or whatever. So it's more like it's giving us more options of places to go. It's giving us an option of a place to go in the middle of an improvisation where suddenly it's very clear that we all understand, we're all playing something that has been rehearsed. And I think the idea, which is the effect that you're describing, and actually another friend of ours last night told me something similar, is to have something that sounds explicitly composed and rehearsed emerge organically out of something that feels a bit more spontaneous and improvisational, and to try to blur the seams there. That seems to be where it's headed, and the most interesting direction.
Sure.
That material for me, anyway.
So we're in the middle of June now, and you guys are just starting this short West Coast tour. But you played several gigs in March in Europe. That sounded like it was kind of an intense period of time. And that was also the first time you guys got the trio back together to play again
Yeah.
for this European tour. And
Mhm.
Fred described the March tour in Europe as interesting times, to say the least. To give a little context, it wasn't just the COVID stuff that we're kind of coming out of now, but this war in Ukraine had started, and that was obviously having an impact. What were these interesting times like for you guys on this tour in Europe?
Well, before it even began, the tour, like some of the things we had to look into, like in the requirements for different countries, the paperwork, the forms, all that was kind of pretty intense
What
and
countries?
changing.
What countries did you hit?
It was all, I mean, it was a lot. It was all EU except for Israel was one stop in it, but it was like Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, Austria,
Switzerland, Czech Republic.
Switzerland.
Wow,
Republic, yeah. But
quite a lot.
and I forget, was it like March 3rd? Was that when the tour started?
Yeah, Jordan and I flew over on the 3rd.
Yeah,
And
because the like March 1st, a lot of regulations loosened up or
right,
changed. But before that, leading up to that, we were just like, writing each other and trying to figure out like, what do I put in this, or what do I fill out in this form, or do I
Uh,
need to have this, or
are you talking about COVID regulations?
mostly that? Yeah, yeah, pretty
yeah,
much
you
all of
have
that.
various different like vaccination certificates, or they're
Yeah.
different places have their own codes and requirements and things. And so when we landed in Italy, we had to do a test, and we had to test again when we went to Israel. We landed in Tel Aviv, and then we had to have a 24-hour quarantine waiting for those tests. And but yeah, as Jordan was saying, the preparation for that leading up to that was again a bit like, this could change tomorrow, it could, and it could change in 5 different ways, so there, yeah, I was
And you were on a pretty tight schedule too, from what I could see.
Yeah,
yep,
yeah, and that second show in Israel, like I tested positive for COVID when
Oh,
we landed, and so they played that show as a duo,
oh,
and then for the next 6 days after that, I stayed in Tel Aviv, and they went on and did 5 or 6 more shows, 5 maybe.
uh, 4. The
Oh,
Tel Aviv show was the 5th.
okay.
So when we left, so yeah, Fred and I played that show as a duo, and then the next morning we left and went to Brussels and played Brussels, and then yeah, there was 4 other shows besides Tel Aviv. Mm-hmm.
And they had 2 different drummers kind of split up those shows that Fred was able to get to do those.
But that was that. I don't know what other interesting times Fred is referencing, but for that was the sort of most explosive kind of like, oh God, what we're dealing with this. How is this going to work? And
yeah, because it was unclear at first if would I be out in like 3 days, or it was just a couple days. There was these different like if I can test out and they let me out at this point, do I meet up with you and do these? You know, it was a little up in the air. And then towards the end of it, I think there was like, okay, regardless, you'll meet us in Paris on this date and we'll pick it back up from there. But it put a major kink in the integration of the compositions into the music.
Oh,
like
sure.
that was the whole idea, was like, you know, this show we'll add this one in, and this show we'll add these in, and we'll start to develop it. And it was like right out of the gate, I was sidelined, and so it was like, you know, and I knew the music the best, and so how are they gonna
That's true.
how are they gonna carry on with that?
How are we gonna survive?
Well, Jason, you didn't get COVID on that?
No, I had COVID in January.
Oh, okay.
But no, Fred and I somehow slipped through. So.
Right. But then there was also, you start this in early March, and I believe the war in Ukraine started like right at the end of February, if I recall correctly. Do you remember what the state of, or did that have any impact on you guys traveling around, other than maybe people are talking about?
I didn't feel it really, other than when we went to was it when we were in Prague?
Train station.
There were some refugees moving through the train stations.
Oh.
And we saw people, you know, sort of like that seemed to be in charge of directing people, like, you know, in various directions where to go. I don't, that was as much as I think that was as much as I picked up on.
Sure. And how well attended were these shows in Europe?
Good. Yeah. It's interesting that, so we show to show, we might play a club that holds 200 people, and then a concert hall that holds 600, and then a club that holds 200 again, and then, you know, another big concert hall or something. So it kind of goes all over the place in terms of capacity. But they always feel full, if not sold out. They feel full in terms of presence. The crowd is always feels enthusiastic and full and warm to me.
All right, so you guys come back to the U.S. after how much time did you spend in March in Europe?
3 weeks.
About 16 days.
Wow.
17 days.
Sounds like you did like over 10 shows in 16 days.
It was, I think it ended up being 12 shows.
Oh, okay.
There, we had a couple of days that were strictly travel.
Okay, so that's March, and now here we are in mid-June, and you're starting a short tour of the West Coast. What did you do in between?
As a group?
Yeah, as a group.
We rehearsed a little.
Yeah, just brushing off the rust on the on the composed stuff.
So you did manage to work on the composed material on the March tour somewhat.
A tiny bit, maybe, and only, I don't know, out of a handful of pieces, maybe only like 2 of them kind of got played a little bit. Wouldn't you say?
Right.
Yeah. There was like we landed at a place where we said there's one set of composed heads, basically. There's like 6 of them that are all like 8 bars long or something, and we just said, oh, we'll just play these twice in a row, 1 through 6, and we started opening the show with that, and that's what we did last night as well. And so that's kind of just stuck as like the if we open with some composed material, we open with that. And then there's another one where like I said, described earlier, I start the sort of bass vamp in the middle of an improvisation, and then Jordan and Fred will join that. That started to that was the first one that sort of, I think, organically started emerging in the middle of improvised stuff. And then that's kind of it, right? There was another one we played as a short one that we play as a standalone thing, just to start doing it. And then there were elements of others, at least for me. I would, there's one, like I started in the middle of an improvisation. I started introducing the motive that one of the composed pieces ends with. So not playing the whole thing, but just like, oh, here's how this one ends. I'm going to start bringing in that motive and use that as a device to steer the composition. So I think in terms of the compositional material finding its way into the improvisations, a couple of the things started just showing up organically. And then as we reflected on that, we started coming up with more premeditated ideas about how to weave them in. I think I got off track from your original question, but
no, that's all right. Because this kind of leads up to, last night at the Ivy Room, that was your first gig of this short West Coast tour, right?
Yeah.
And tonight you're off to Sacramento for the next night. And then what's the plan for the rest of the tour?
Next week we go to LA. We play at Zebulon in LA. And then on the 1st of July, we'll go up to and play in Portland and then Seattle. Well, we play in Portland on the 2nd and Seattle on the 3rd.
All driving?
Yeah, those are drives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what can people in those towns anticipate from the Fred Frith Trio? Are you going to be molding this material more in front of live audiences?
Yeah. From what you heard, I think was a little more disjointed in terms of like we played a piece, we stopped, applause, kind of reoriented, like said, hey, let's do this one, and did like right. So they were kind of like that, presented that way. But
what you're telling me, there was no set list?
Well, we know how we're going to start, and we know how where the other ones can maybe fall in terms of like we have ones that need to start from nothing, like with a count off or something, and then we have ones that can kind of emerge from improvisations. And so it was just a matter of like but we did a rehearsal before this gig that I thought was super promising, and it was much more of a kind of one continuous set. Maybe there was a break in there, but it kind of really showed how, to me at least, how these things could work. But then at the Ivy Room, the show you were at, they just came out that way, where they were all a little more standalone.
Yeah. So last night was a bit of a first. It was a bit of an experiment in terms of like what Jordan just described, that we started a piece and knew that we were going to wrap it up and then start from zero with one of the composed pieces, and then wrap it up and then start from zero with one of the composed pieces, all while also interspersing the other pieces that we decided to arrange that can emerge from an improvisation that's already happening. But on tour, for instance, and I mean, understanding that again, like because Jordan was sidelined with COVID and the whole plan kind of got stalled. I think we would have gotten into more of that kind of thing on tour, but the way it happened was on tour, generally we would start a set and not stop until the end of the set. So on tour, the sets tends to be one long piece. We'll play for anywhere from 40 to 75 minutes and without stopping and starting a new thing. So last night was kind of, last night it was a bit experimental for us in those terms, in that we knew there was going to be stop and start points, and that's not at all usually how it unfolds for us live. We usually start and then stop, and then that's it.
Right. Well, yeah, in the past, I think the times I've seen you before were completely improvised from start to finish. There were no compositional elements at all. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the upcoming shows, you'll continue to surprise and amaze your audiences, I'm sure. Last night, as I said, was really fantastic. I would encourage people even if you've seen the Fred Frith Trio before, do not miss this trio because it was quite a powerful performance last night. After this short tour, what are the plans for the Fred Frith Trio?
So we were talking about going back to Europe in the spring. This next coming spring. The tours to Europe have been every other year up to this point. So this will be the first time we return a year, just a year out. So that's exciting. We'll see how that goes. I would like to keep exploring where we could go with some composed material. I have some ideas that I've sort of mentioned in passing about arranging some things. I don't know. But I'm talking out on the fringe of like what I'm imagining us doing. I know Fred is always busy. He's always working. He's always got things on his plate. Right now he's wrapping up, trying to wrap up and start in rehearsals for this opera that he's doing in France. He's always got recordings he's got to listen to and all of these kinds of things. So he's got a lot on his plate. But coming off of this last tour in Europe, the general feeling from all of us was let's just play more. From Fred included, we were all three of us were like, let's just keep going. Let's do more. Let's do more shows. So I think.
How about recording? Any plans for recording?
Not yet, but I could see there being, especially with this written stuff. Like if,
Yeah.
We've also played in the past with guest horns and stuff, and I know I heard him mention something about being interested in maybe doing some of the composed material with additional horns.
Yeah.
But again, who who knows? I think it's one step at a time. But I could see this written material wanting to be documented.
Yeah.
The way it's going right now, like I feel like it totally could.
Yeah.
And should.
I could anticipate recording again, but including some composed material and some friends of ours who we've played with live before, particularly Susana Santos Silva on trumpet and Lotta Anchor on sax. And who are actually the musicians who are on the live CD that Jordan mentioned earlier. We played with Susanna a bunch in different contexts, but the shows that are on that CD with her are from Virginia, and the show with Lotta Anchor on that CD are in Ebersberg. And is it just the Ebersberg show? It is, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I can't remember.
Yeah. So I think we'll record again, and I think it will include some composed stuff and possibly some guests.
Right.
Yeah, it's always time and money, I think, are the issue.
Yeah.
I just can't wait for more Fred Frith Trio and to see what happens with you guys. So have fun on this tour. And I hope you play at a venue near me again in the not too distant future. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.